स्वामिन् नमस्ते नतलोकबन्धो कारुण्यसिन्धो पतितं भवाब्धौ मामुद्धरात्मीयकटाक्षदृष्ट्या ऋज्व्यातिकारुण्य सुधाभिवृष्ट्या स्वामिन् नमस्ते स्वामिन् नमस्ते स्वामिन् नमस्ते स्वामिन् नमस्ते। शान्ता महान्तो निवसन्ति सन्तो वसन्तवल्लोकहितं चरन्तः तीर्णा स्वयं भीमभवार्णवं जनान् अहेतुनान्यानपि तारयन्तः अहेतुनान्यानपि तारयन्तः। Jai Guru, Jai Guru, Jai Guru. In the last session, I was discussing the Prabhata Rashmih talk of Poojya Swamiji, 15 July 1997. In the first volume of Prabhata Rashmih book, it is the 11th one. And it has been titled as Self Everywhere. So Swamiji had mentioned about this shloka from Bhagavad Gita. Atmaupamyena sarvatra samam pashyati Arjuna sukham va yadi va dukkham sa yogi paramo matah. 6.32 of Bhagavad Gita. And this shloka says that yogi who sees the self everywhere and finds the same self in sukha as well as dukkha, that yogi is the best and the highest. And Swamiji said very important sentences. I think all of us should try to introspect more and more, going deep into the words and the sentences, what it means and how we relate to those sentences for our own sadhana and seeking. Like I had referred to this portion of the talk and discussed it, where Swamiji is being asked by a seeker how to overcome resentment. And Swamiji said that there is no spiritual benefit in doing what you like or in not doing what you don't like. If spiritual sublimation and purity is the goal, then do cheerfully what you would not like to, and also be prepared not to do what you would very much like to. This is very important for any seeker, anybody. Mostly we always like to do what we want to do, what we like, and we are averse to doing things which we don't like. And when we face with such work which we don't like but we have to do, we do it with a lot of grumbling, feeling that why I have to do this, etc., etc. So, for a seeker, whether any situation is likable or dislikable, one has to have the same attitude towards both of them. This samam pashyati. In everything, it is the self and self. Self is everywhere. Everything is the expression of the self. And how do we relate it to ourselves? In everyday life, when we work, we have to see we have to judge ourselves, analyze our behavior, analyze our thoughts, whether we have been able to keep to this truth that likes and dislikes all are expressions of the self. Today I was talking to one young seeker and telling the same thing. I was telling him that this is what our Swamiji has explained. And in this book, when we read each and every line, should not be just reading, but stopping at each and every sentence, trying to find the deeper meaning of the sentences, what Swamiji has spoken, and then apply it to ourselves to see how we are faring in our seeking and as a seeker's growth. So, he says that if spiritual sublimation and purity is the goal, then do cheerfully what you would not like to, and also be prepared not to do what you would very much like to. So, you must be as happy by not doing as by doing, and thereby overcome the bondage of happiness and unhappiness. This sticking to likes and dislikes, we get bound. And what is this getting bound mean? When we don't get what we like, we are disturbed, we are irritated, afflicted. And when we get, then we are overduly, we are elated. So all these things bring in lot of restlessness in the mind. And we get bound by the bondage of happiness and unhappiness. Actually, everybody runs after happiness. Nobody wants unhappiness. But unhappiness comes. Even if we don't want, unhappiness comes. It goes away also. Then another incident of happiness comes. Happiness and unhappiness, they come and go in cycles. But we get bound when we want only happiness and we do not want unhappiness. That is the bondage. So Swamiji is saying, you must be as happy by not doing as by doing. And thereby, this thereby word is very important. Allow unhappiness to come and happiness to come. Allow whatever you like to come and whatever you dislike also to come. That you face both equally, with equipoise. And thereby overcome. If we can do that, then only we can overcome the bondage of happiness and unhappiness. So, then he said, whatever you do, wherever you are, with whatever persons, places or thoughts you interact, in everything the same Atma, the same self, the same Atmic experience, the same sublimation should be felt. So this is a practice. We have not been practicing this. We did not even know that we have to practice this. Nobody told us. But as soon as we know this, and who is telling? A Guru, a Mahatma is telling, taking from the Shastras, the sacred texts or scriptures, and he is explaining to us what it really means. A sloka, what it really means. It means that in whatever situation we are, whatever we have to face, whatever interactions we have, in everything we must have the same sublimation and the same Atmic experience. Sukha is an expression of the self. Dukkha too is an expression of the same self. As you are at home with Sukha, when we have pleasantness or delight or happiness, we are at home. We are very happy. We feel blessed. And we feel that this will be always there with us. So we are at home with the Sukha. So you should be at home with Dukkha also. So you should be at home with Dukkha also. Just as we are at home with sukha, happiness, we should be at home with dukkha also, because it comes, uninvited it comes. Similarly, sukha also will come uninvited. We don't have to make an effort for it. It will come. But in cycles it will come, one after another. And we should be at home with both. The bitterness of the mind in facing an unpleasant situation, you have to sublimate. Whenever we are in an unpleasant situation, we have lot of bitterness, lot of grumbling, lot of fault finding, lot of criticism. All that have to be sublimated. We should think that as the happy moments, happy episodes or happy incidents come and I am happy, similarly this has come. This will pass off also. The bitterness will not be there. So we have to practice to become sublimated. The love for pleasant interactions, you have to sublimate. The love for pleasant interactions, you have to sublimate. The love for pleasant interactions, you have to sublimate. Sukha dukkha's are the final subjective outcome of all interactions in our life. And you have to find the self, not away from sukha dukkha's, but in and through sukha dukkha's, as sukha and as dukkha. So, in our life there are two experiences. What are those? In all interactions, the final subjective outcome or the experience is either happiness or unhappiness. And we have to find the self not away from that, not away from the happiness and unhappiness. In and through the happiness and unhappiness, only undergoing them, we have to find that both are the same expression of the same self, the one self. And we have to find them, find sukha as the self as well as dukkha as the self. Up to this I did in the last session, but Swamiji has continued. So what he says, let us see again. He says, he then chants the sloka. Atmaupamyena sarvatra samam pashyati Arjuna sukham va yadi va dukkham sayogi paramo mataha. So, on this day, I think it is the next day that he has said, I started with 15 July and very next day he is continuing this discussion. Just like I am also continuing. The previous session I could do only this much and today I am continuing. So the very next day Swamiji starts keeping his eyes closed and chanting this sloka from Bhagavad Gita. Then he said, this is the verse we were discussing yesterday. I sometimes feel that this verse has not been properly commented upon, bringing forth the sublimity and fullness of its message. Swamiji said that this is what I discussed, but he feels that this sloka, which is the cream of experiencing the self in everything, he feels it has not been properly commented upon, and the sublimity and fullness of its message has not been brought forth. So he is explaining it further. According to Vedanta, although meditation forms an important aspect of the life of contemplation, it is not the be-all and end-all of spiritual life. What a comment Swamiji is making. He says that in Vedanta, meditation is given a lot of importance. Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana. We have to meditate upon the messages of the Upanishads, on the self, on Brahman. And we have to meditate and get into the Nirvikalpa Samadhi and experience the self. But Swamiji is saying that though in Vedanta, meditation forms an important aspect of the life of contemplation, it is not the be-all and end-all of spiritual life. Meditation climaxes in Samadhi, and Samadhi paves the way for wisdom. Wisdom is the pinnacle of spiritual pursuit. So, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. We have to listen to, then more than we have listened, many times more we have to reflect upon and ruminate upon what we have heard. And more than that, we have to contemplate upon the message, the truth, and meditate, get absorbed into the truth, and get into Samadhi. And the Samadhi gives us wisdom. Wisdom of what? Wisdom of the self, the ultimate reality, the supreme reality. So, meditation climaxes in Samadhi, and Samadhi paves the way for wisdom. Wisdom is the pinnacle of spiritual pursuit. Now, what is this spiritual wisdom? Swamiji is asking. It is an understanding. He's explaining it. What is spiritual wisdom? It is an understanding, an enlightenment which takes away from your mind and intelligence all kinds of differentiation. What is this spiritual wisdom? It is an understanding, an enlightenment which takes away from your mind and intelligence all kinds of differentiation. Wisdom removes the bheda buddhi, the dividing and contrasting intellect that differentiates between the godly and the non-godly, self and non-self. Let us understand it. What is Swamiji saying? Swamiji first said that meditation is, according to Vedanta, although meditation forms an important aspect of the life of contemplation, it is not the be-all and end-all of spiritual life. Meditation climaxes in Samadhi, and Samadhi paves the way for wisdom. So, we must meditate to get into Samadhi, that is the climax, and through Samadhi only we go to the climax or the pinnacle where we get the spiritual wisdom. Wisdom is the pinnacle of spiritual pursuit. What is this spiritual wisdom? It is an understanding, an enlightenment, which takes away from your mind and intelligence all kinds of differentiation. All kinds of differentiation will be gone from the mind and intelligence. Now we are having all kinds of differentiation. We know that the self is one. We know Brahman is one. We know that it is the one without second. But still, we are in the world where there are varieties of forms and names and so many other things. So, we are not able to find that oneness in everything. Although this whole world, including our body, is the expression of the self. So, What is the spiritual wisdom? By spiritual pursuit, what are we wanting to attain? We are wanting to attain that realization of the self by which this differentiation goes away, Bheda Buddhi goes away. Now, we feel that self is inside us. It is our real identity. I am the self. I am not this body. And this whole world, including my body, is also the non-self. We don't find divinity in many of our activities and behavior. Our thoughts, our actions, we don't find divinity. We don't find the self in that. The time that we meditate or the time that we are doing swadhyaya, say reading or contemplating or worshipping, we feel that we are divine and we are connected to the self. Rest of our activities, we don't find the self so much. Not at all. We feel that we are doing worldly activities. So, what is spiritual wisdom? The wisdom is only one. The truth is only one. That it is self and self everywhere. There is nothing apart from the self. So we have to understand that. Even though when we are in the midst of all kinds of varieties, we have to understand that beneath all kinds of variations, there is a constant substratum which is the self. And the self is expressing in various manners. So he says, it is an understanding and enlightenment which takes away from your mind and intelligence all kinds of differentiation. The spiritual wisdom removes the Bheda Buddhi. What is Bheda Buddhi? Bheda Buddhi means differential attitude in the intelligence. The dividing and contrasting intellect that differentiates between godly and non-godly, that's divine and non-divine, self and non-self. It is on this point that most of the seekers, devotees, and even ascetics remain deluded. What an important point, my dear children. It is on this point that most of the seekers, devotees, and even ascetics remain deluded. Why deluded? You know, those who worship, those who are given to spiritual pursuit, the pursuit may be every day taken to a routine. It may be reading, studying the scriptures, chanting some shlokas, doing some worship, prayers, and also listening and introspecting and meditating. All these should not become a routine. Through this discipline and the practice and the routine, we have to reach what? The goal where there is no Bheda Buddhi, where we find the self everywhere, where we do not have any differentiation at all anymore. So Swamiji says, on this point, most of the seekers, devotees, and even ascetics remain deluded because they go on doing their practice, same practice every day, day after day, day after day, day after day. And most of them do not think whether there is anything beyond this where we have to reach. And what is that ultimate destination? Where you find the self everywhere. That is what the Jivan Muktas attain. They have attained that depth of vision, that experience where they remain in this world even after self-realization, where they remain in the knowledge of the self and then they act and interact. That is why Swamiji says everything in this ashram revolves around spirituality. It is, my dear children, that is why Guru Sannidhi is so very important. One must come to the Guru, watch him, how he is, what he thinks, how he acts, reacts, talks, embraces everybody, one and all, whether a person is young in age, old in age, whether a person is poor or rich, illiterate or educated, from this country or other. He embraces everybody because for him, it is he who is expressed everywhere. He means what? His self. So, he then says, you may experience the self in Samadhi, but the moment you come out of Samadhi, it is again the plural world that possesses your mind and intelligence. How beautiful. You know, all seekers, they try to meditate. Some, they are successful in meditating, getting absorbed. But this is the question. You may experience the self in Samadhi, but the moment you come out of Samadhi, it is again the plural world that possesses your mind and intelligence. What do you do now? Normally, the sensory perceptions in the thoughts of the mind and the reasoning of the intelligence, you will find a clear note of division or separatedness. The senses remain separate from the objects perceived. The thinker remains distinct from the thoughts. The intelligence remains separate from the knowledge it brings forth. Except in sleep, there is always a sense of division. The senses perceive the objects. The sense organs and the senses, they are different from the objects that they are engaged in. And the thought, a person thinks, thoughts and the thinker, they are different from each other. Separate, they are separate. There is a thinker who thinks, and the thoughts of the thinkers are there, separate from him. Similarly, the intelligence remains separate from the knowledge it brings forth. Whatever knowledge we get, intelligence is actually getting the knowledge. When we are in sleep, everything merges. There is no differentiation anymore. As against this, there comes a state when the seeker realizes that there is the self and self alone. So in this paragraph, what is Swamiji saying? When we sleep off, then everything becomes one. I mean, we don't come to know even what is happening. As long as we are awake, it is all different. The senses and the objects are separate from each other. Thoughts are different from the thinker. Intelligence is different from the knowledge. So, the actor is different from the action. Everything is different. Except when we sleep, we don't know what is happening. We just get up and say that I did not know anything in deep sleep. It's not a state like that which Swamiji is trying to explain. What he is trying to explain? As against this, there comes a state when the seeker realizes that there is the self and self alone. That is, even if you are awake, in the wakeful state, earlier in the wakeful state, everything is different. From each other, separatedness is there, Bheda Buddhi is there. But there is a state where even in the wakeful state, the seeker will feel that no separatedness is there, everything is a self and self alone. And that is not happening in meditation. That is happening when you are awake. So the realization must go to that level so that even in the wakeful state, you will feel that the self is everywhere. He perceives oneness in everything, so much so that he is not able to think of anything different from the self. These lines, they're so much full of the truth. Who is saying this? A realized master, his experiences, and this is the same experience of every realized master. He's saying that that kind of a state is there. You will remain wakeful, but you will still feel that there is oneness in everything. So much so that he is not able to think of anything different from the self. It is not that the perceptual variety gets lost or dissolved. My dear children, mark this sentence. It is not that the perceptual variety gets lost or dissolved. It's not that the senses have got dulled. They have not become dull. They have not become inactive. The sensational perceptions are all there. But the plurality is not destroyed altogether, but it gets soaked in the oneness of the self. Do you get it? The perceptual variety does not get lost or dissolved. Perceptual variety remains. So, perceptual variety remains, plurality remains, but the plurality is not destroyed altogether. It gets soaked in the oneness of the self. What a beautiful sentence. What an enlightening sentence. You know, when I read it, I was feeling that this beautiful sentence has come out of the mouth of a realized master. And while reading it, I have written here a mark, a note. So beautiful. So beautiful. When we know of this beauty, should we not try to reach there? At least walk towards that. Feeling ourselves full with that divinity which that destination promises us. Every step is full of divinity, even though we are in the plural world. The plurality is not destroyed altogether, but it gets soaked in the oneness of the self. The pinnacle of spiritual pursuit consists in attaining such a state of uniformity and unbroken realization where self alone remains. The pinnacle of spiritual pursuit consists in attaining such a state of uniformity and unbroken realization where self alone remains. That is, we can see the self and self everywhere. There is no differentiation. Law of plurality will be there everywhere, but we are understanding the underlying sameness everywhere. Just like the electricity, a crude example maybe. So many things are running here in this room with electricity. The two lights, my mic, the fans, the AC, the camera. All are differently shaped, different looking. Their actions are also different. But they are run by the same electricity. It is like that. Atmaupamyena sarvatra samam pashyati Arjuna sukham va yadi va dukkham sayogi paramo mataha. What is that state in actual experience? So what did Swamiji say? He chanted this verse again and is asking again, what is that state in actual experience? Which state? The pinnacle of spiritual pursuit consists in attaining such a state of uniformity and unbroken realization where self alone remains. What is that state in actual experience? How do we experience it? Sukham va yadiva dukkham. Sukha and dukkha are the ultimate mental effects of all kinds of interactions that you all know. That the senses are 5, but the experiences that they give us are only 2. Either happiness or unhappiness, sukha or dukkha. Whether it is sukha or dukkha, both are expressions of the self. The sun causes light. It is the sun that causes darkness too. In light, the sun shines in the form of presence, and in darkness, it is revealed by its absence. Likewise, the self alone is revealed in both sukha and dukkha. Thus, sukha dukkha should become coeval with the self. Such a beautiful example. What is the example? The sun causes light. It is the sun which causes darkness also by its absence. So, when the sun rises and shines in the sky, we find the sun is shining. It is giving us light. And when the sun sets, darkness sets in. And what happens? It is the absence of the same sun which has caused the darkness. So, in getting light or sunshine, and when it is darkness, it is the same sun which is once present and once not there. Same suns, two different states. So, in light, the sun shines in the form of presence, and darkness it is revealed by its absence. Likewise, the self alone is revealed in both sukha and dukkha. Similarly, in both sukha and dukkha, when sukha is there, it is the self, and dukkha is also the self. In sukha, when we get happiness, we feel elated and joyous and delighted. And we feel that we are able to perceive the self, or the self is revealed. But when dukkha comes and happiness comes, it is the same self. Only now, instead of sukha, the sukha has gone and absence of sukha has brought about the dukkha. But it is the same sukha, same self in both. The sukha dukkha should become coeval with the self. Have you understood? Both are expressions of the self. The sun example is very good. I remember once, long back, when I was in the household, one day I was not feeling very well in my mind. It had become dark, and I was looking through the window. And I felt that, I don't know why, how, it had happened to me before I even heard this Prabhata Rashmih. So I was looking through the window, and slowly the sun was setting and the darkness came in. And I thought that, oh, now it has become dark. And immediately the thought came to the mind, just like the sun set and the darkness came in, light vanished and darkness appeared. Similarly, it happens to the mind. I was not feeling very happy that day. So I thought that just like it happens in the nature, in our mind also, the unhappiness comes and the happiness goes away. After some time, the happiness comes in and again the unhappiness goes away. Is it not the same expression of the same mind which is perceiving this happiness and unhappiness? This is what happens to us. And Swamiji has given this example so well. God interprets the whole of creation. God interpenetrates the whole of creation. The creation has its imbalances, conflicts and contradictions. The creation has its imbalances, conflicts and contradictions. But God remains Himself, unaffected by whatever takes place in His creation. So God has created the creation, and there are so many things happening in this world, from war to poverty to riches to education to non-literacy, everything. Poor people suffering, people enjoying, so many things. Animals, birds, reptiles, insects, human beings. So many things He has created. The mountains, the seas, the rivers, the plants and the flowers and the fruits, all is His creation. We cannot create any of them. It is His creation. It will be all right, and it is absolutely necessary to remember that this creation, where I am also a creation, I have no control over it. I cannot make such a creation and run it. There is a supreme power which runs it, which has created it and runs it according to His own will. Nothing belongs to me. We cannot make a human body with hands, feet, mind, intelligence, senses. We cannot. So what belongs to me then? Nothing belongs to me. We feel that this body is mine. This body is mine. Can I make this body? Similarly, whatever we feel belong to us, everything is created by the same power. So nothing belongs to us at all. Now, Swamiji is saying God interpenetrates the whole creation. The creation has its imbalances, conflicts, contradictions, but God remains Himself unaffected by whatever takes place in His creation. Why unaffected? Whatever is going on, the sun rises, the sun sets, the moon rises, the moon sets, the seasons come with their seasonal flowers, seasonal fruits. After summer, the rains come, then the winter come in cycle. What is happening? Still the nature goes on and on and on in the same manner. He remains unaffected. So, when you know that you are the self, and the self is no other than the all-pervading Brahman, you too must remain unaffected. This is what Swamiji is saying. I am the self is everywhere. We have to understand, not only in meditation, but in all our plural perceptions, our life in this plural world, we must know that everything is an expression of the self. Just like God, who creates this whole world and makes this variety, He remains unaffected and goes on and on. He remains the same, changeless. We too must remain unaffected. unconditioned, uninflicted by whatever happens. Is it not very nice to know this? Such a path is being shown, is made open to us. When something happens, we just get drowned. We cry, we shout, we blame God, we blame everybody in this world that why this has happened. But for a spiritual seeker, even if all the adversities come, a state is there. If one reaches that state, then, as it is said in Bhagavad Gita, even the worst of adversity, let it come, one will not be affected by it. And here Swamiji is explaining that will come only when we make a practice of seeing the self everywhere in all perceptions, all plurality. Keeping away the Bheda Buddhi, dissolving this Bheda Buddhi, the differential attitude of the intelligence. So he says, when you know that you are the self, and the self is no other than the all-pervading Brahman, you too must remain unaffected, unconditioned, uninflicted by whatever happens. What is this whatever? Swamiji said, by whatever happens. Now he says, what is this whatever? It means whatever happens physically, whatever is happening in the mind, and whatever may take place in the external world. Physically, if anything happens, physically or internally in the mind, you are getting a turmoil, your intelligence is confused and absolutely non-decisive. Whatever happens, you must not forget that you are the self. And whatever happens in the external world also. Let the body be restless. Let the mind be agitated. Let intelligence bring forth its arguments and undulations. In spite of all this, the underlying perception of oneness and the resulting unaffectedness must remain undisturbed. What does it say? It means whatever happens physically, whatever is happening in the mind and intelligence, and whatever may take place in the external world, never be affected, never be conditioned. Let it not inflict any kind of suffering. Remain unaffected in every situation. Then he is explaining, let the body be restless, let the mind be agitated, let the intelligence bring forth its arguments and undulations. See, these are the various pluralities. Pluralities in the plural world will may be having many things which the body might feel very restless, disease, sick, whatever. And the mind may be agitated, disturbed. The intelligence may be having so many questions and arguments. But in spite of all this, the underlying perception of oneness and resulting unaffectedness must remain undisturbed. Even though all this is happening, one must know that I am the one. All that is happening, the disturbances, the restlessness, the arguments are happening in the body, mind, intelligence, and I am not identified with them. I am the self, the changeless, and body, mind, intelligence is changeful. I am not identified with them. I am the eternal self. All that is happening in the body, mind and intelligence, the afflictions that we feel are theirs. If we mistakenly identify with them, we feel, I have been afflicted, but I am the self. So my unaffected nature I must preserve. That is, the oneness and the resulting unaffectedness must remain undisturbed. So my dear children, these introspections are very, very important. As much as we dwell in these thoughts, and where will you dwell? It is not that you sit with the book and dwell. It is talking about the wakeful state of ours, where we are active, where we are speaking, where we are walking, where we are interacting, we are doing some actions. In those states, we have to keep the truth always with us, that I am unaffected and I am the self, and that self is everywhere. So whatever changes take place, he says that whether it is in the mind, whether it is in the body, in the intelligence, or in the world something is happening, in the society something is happening, it's not that we will not be concerned about it. It's not that we will not try to bring in some remedial measures when something happens. Suppose somebody is sick, we cannot say that, oh, he is the self, unaffected. We cannot say that. We'll have to do everything. But beyond this sukha and dukkha, knowing that I'm not going to get affected by sukha and dukkha. I am the unaffected self. And unaffectedness is liberation. Liberation, what it is? To get out of the bondages of the mind and intelligence. Shackles of the mind and intelligence. So unaffectedness is liberation. See, in front of a lamp, somebody may read sacred scriptures. Somebody may be using the same lamp and doing wrong things. But the lamp remains unaffected. The actions which are happening, they are different. They are plural. XYZ is doing so many things. But the lamp which is giving light, because of the light in the night, they are able to do the actions. Actions are various, but the lamp which is giving the light is the same. It is like that. The body is restless, the mind is restless and agitated, the intelligence is having its arguments and difficulties, but the self is unaffected because it knows the oneness that pervades everywhere. My dear souls, Swamiji is saying, I am open. Let the body or the mind be restless. Let the intelligence have its functions. There must be a perceptional ability in you by virtue of which the Atma will be felt uniformly in all the conditions or bhavas, emotions. That is, he says, now you must imagine the scene. We are all sitting at his feet. Poojya Swamiji, after Pushpa Samarpanam, is telling us all this about the self, how you can see the self everywhere. And he's saying that you have to see it in your wakeful state. And he says, with eyes closed, he's saying, after having said all this, he says, my dear souls, he's addressing us. I am open. Let the body or the mind be restless. Let the intelligence have its functions. There must be a perceptional ability in you by virtue of which the Atma will be felt uniformly. In all the conditions or bhavas. Self-experience is a mighty experience, different from all other experiences of the waking state. But mind you, it is only to make you identify the self. Once it is identified, the understanding will become complete only when you know that the self alone is manifesting in every kind of experience. I cannot say what I don't find expression. I find that these are so very valuable statements to be understood, to assimilate, to remember, and to constantly strive to become like this. And this striving is not difficult. It is through our everyday actions. It is just the wish to become so. Self-experience is a mighty experience, different from all other experiences of the waking state. But mind you, it is only to make you identify the self. You may meditate and identify the self. Once it is identified, or through reading and everything we get a knowledge of the self. That's the characteristics of the self is this. Once it is identified, the understanding will become complete only when you know that the self alone is manifesting in every kind of experience. Every kind of experience, whether it is happiness, unhappiness, whether it is honor, dishonor, whether it is fear or fearlessness, whether it is a lack or a fullness, everything, profit, loss, any emotion, everything, delusion, even in that, memory loss, even in that, whatever we have, every kind of experience, self alone is. Pratibodha viditam matam. This is a portion from Kenopanishad. I'll discuss it in the next session and see what Swamiji says further. Today I will stop. Sampurnam jagadeva nandanavanam sarvepi kalpadrumaha Gangam vari samasta vari nivaha punya samasta kriyaha vacha prakrita samskrita shruti shiro varanasi medini sarvavasthitirasya vastu vishaya drishti Parabrahmani sarvavasthitirasya vastu vishaya drishti parabrahmani. Jai Guru.